So good afternoon, and thank you for coming this afternoon to this talk. My name is Paola Nicolin, and I work as an art historian for Bocconi University and Abitare. And Bocconi University is actually the place where the research we are discussing today has been conceived by the team of Professor Baia Curioni. What we are going to address in a very interrogative way is what happened in Basel in the last 5 years in terms of list of names of artists related to their nationality that are passing by in these last 5 years. So there are several questions that we can, from which we can start, and the first one probably is a basic one, is why is it interesting studying the art market, or why is it interesting addressing the economic environment where artworks has been produced. And of course we will see a kind of graphic and visualization of this list of names that are reflecting, of course, a list of networks that is behind the list of names. So the question is, after the conceptual art movement, why we have to study, why it's interesting to study art markets, and how we can learn from a first interpretation of this data. The issues could be spread along the art making process. Does the market affect the way artists produce their works? Or which is the extent of looking and seeing this map for the first time in a graphic? Or again, is the market a kind of historical framework in which we can write, read, and learn history of art? So of course we won't reply to all these questions, but we will try to address kind of reason why Bocconi University started this research in the last 2 years. So I will lead to Professor Baia Curioni.
Thank you.
And then to Marta Kuzma, who will discuss with us the issues.
Thank you, Paola. My name is Stefano Baia Curioni, and I'm directing this strange research process, which is trying to grab some evidences from the experience of Art Basel in the last 6 years. Just going into directly the result of this first and tentative research, which are the premises. The idea is that galleries, and generally speaking, the art system, which is promoting art, is not only having a delivery system, but they are gatekeeper, they are mediator, they are producing imaginaries all along the economic activities. And therefore, the art system is playing a role in the social recognition of art that influences in the long term also the history of the art. So there is a mixed role which is relevant to be analyzed. Of course, there is a hierarchical system that found in Art Basel as one of the top moments of recognition. And of course, we had a market growth in the last 5 years, in spite of the huge crisis. And the question is how this market enlargement affected the way in which the system has worked. Let's go into the evidences. The first evidence is that the system is very stable. We are observing the Art Basel fair. So we use the public available data, the artist listed, the gallery listed. So the first point is that the distribution, national distribution of galleries is pretty stable. The red line represents on top the national distribution of the galleries in the 5 years, and the blue line represents the new entrance. And you see the two lines are almost completely overlapped. That means that the national distribution is pretty stable. So that if someone come into, this incoming is managed, is controlled, which can be a good or a bad thing. I don't know. We don't know. It's just presenting the data, and you have a very stable environment. The second evidence very quick, is that the portfolio of artists is growing. So the effect of the market probably imply a wider selection of artists, which is an interesting sign of opening of the system. And this opening is particularly concentrated in the artists born after the 70s. So as you can see, the artists from South America, from Asia, from Africa are growing their number in the Basel list. This is a sign of reaction toward the market growth and the globalization. So they're a positive sign of opening inside the system. If we see the overall national platform, this is interesting to notice that we can detect 4 main groups. We have on top right the green group, which is a group of platform of galleries coming from China, India, or Brazil, for example. And these group of galleries are representing mostly national artists, and they are, in a sense, representing all the Indian artists or Chinese artists that are listed in Basel. So these are nationalistic platforms that are emerging in the last year, and they are growing if you see the evolution of this bubble in the 5 years. And you have a central group, which is very stable, of the traditional art system, big nation. And then we have a lower blue group of nations which are pretty much internationalized, so they are not national-oriented. And we have a small group on top left, which are, let's say, dominated, if I may say, platform, or, for example, the Russian and Poland platform, which are mainly representing Russian and Poland artists, but the overall number of Polish artists are more represented by the other than the Polish gallery. So it is a kind of dominated group, and the central group is what you see as very stable and very strong. Then we try to understand what is happening, how is functioning, how the names of artists, how the echoes of the national platform are diffused. If this national concentration in the middle is in a sense a way of producing a big echoes around. And in fact, if we see, if we compare all the portfolio of artists in the 5 years, we see that the national, the central big platform are able to export the name of their artists. So it means that those names are also in the list of the galleries of the rest of the world. Okay, so the United States, the Germany, the France, Italy, and United Kingdom are able to have their national artists listed outside. The echo is strong outside. If we compare this data, which is very simple, to what is happening with the artists born after the 70s, that means try to compare the overall situation, what is happening more recently, because you know that the artists after the 70s are the artists that grown in the last years. We see a picture which is slightly different and interesting in a sense. We see that United States, Germany, and United Kingdom are still able to diffuse the echoes of the artists around, while France and Italy are losing their position. In a sense, for the artists born after the 70s, and this is interesting for me as an Italian, the capability of diffusing the echoes of our artists is lowering in the art Basel system. And this is interesting. I mean, we are not really able to understand completely what does it mean. It could be a reason related to the market. So the people are demanding more artists from the US and Germany and United Kingdom, or can be an issue of networking of galleries, of placing power, or can be other reasons that we may discuss together. If we consider the same data, we see that basically the central, the strong system are organized in that way. But this is more complicated. Maybe we can go on later. So these are basically the first result that we want to share with you, and the discussion is open. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, Stefano, that this is very interesting, and I think it's very rare that we're seeing some kind of scientific analysis of what's going on in the art world. But I'm also wondering that when I'm looking at these statistics, you cannot help but look at the market, but the market is driven obviously by demand. and by the nature of why individuals are actually buying the art, which maybe perhaps is not only from an act of love or an interest, but also an interest in investment. And I'm wondering whether you are finding the same transparency if you were to look into kind of the financial profiles and the portfolios, for example, bank portfolios for investment, and if it is located, have you located within bank portfolios this investment area of art?
Of course, the amount of data that basically you have publicly available for the financial market is much higher than what you have in the arts market, even if the situation is changing, particularly for the auction prices. You have the possibility of having access to the auction prices now. You don't have a possibility of accessing these dynamics, which are underneath the art price. The fact that the name of the artist is spread around in the world, and the way in which this diffusion is managed, and the coalition of galleries which are underlying this dynamic, possibly can be an interesting subject in order to understand how art is functioning now, without any, to my point of view, any moral judgment about the fact that you have economics and art together. This is the reality. The reality is that the two things are together. And of course, this is a private market, and probably it is good that something is not completely disclosed, because it is something that is related to the auratic value of things, and therefore we have to be careful in opening the disclosure. I mean, it is something that I do in a hesitant way, let's say, this kind of research. But in a sense, it's interesting to me to see how the reaction in the last year was the strengthening of the strong. And I'm wondering if this reaction is physiologic. I'm wondering if the reaction may open the space for other platforms to grow. For example, if the Chinese world or the Oriental world is not represented enough, maybe it will be incentivized to create another platform in order to do the same thing that United States, Germany, and United Kingdom are doing in Basel. And this open up competitive scenario for the art system. I don't know if I answered to your...
You were mentioning that Art Basel will now be present in Hong Kong.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it is possible. Voices are going around about the fact that Art Basel is expanding its presence, and this is exactly a physiological reaction to the enlargement of the scope of the market.
I wanted to take this away from the empirical data and saying that, and mentioning another very important thinker in terms of someone who was looking into statistical and scientific analysis in Pierre Bourdieu's Rules of Art, where he was looking at 19th century distributions of literature and specifically looking at Flaubert. And he mentioned that in creating his analysis at that period of time within that book, that there was a resistance to such structural and scientific analysis, because it works within the field of art, which is a field which by nature should be protected by such kind of irrational deconstructions. And he also added that art has traditionally produced this, quote, effect of making the market disappear, that it has been traditionally within a frame that frames the avant-garde, and the avant-garde's premise is to make the potential customer or consumer disappear. So now we're seeing a complete antithesis to that.
You want to say something? I can react on that.
No, the very first things I'm reacting is bringing also into the discussion a kind of more, let's say, geometrical stuff, because I think that kind of graphic like that makes me think about the meaning of networks and grid and cluster into the architectonical field. Like, what does it mean, a grid into the architectonical field? It's a forms that organize the space we live. Okay, we know that we are living in a city. The city is done in different ways, but when you represent the form of the city, the form of your environment, you become more aware of the space you live. And to a certain extent, one of the points that at least interesting to me is how this kind of research, how this kind of glance into the art market, into the space we live, we work, we consume, can say more about ourselves, can visualize much better how we position ourselves into these bubbles that are, floating. So the idea to see what happened in other platforms, as you say before, or the idea to dematerialize everything in, as Marta say, is also a question of space, of which is the space we live. Is an analysis of the market, are these data an input to understand much better the place we are sharing, and how we can position ourselves in a more way, more aware about that. So I don't know if it's something that could connect your thought about that.
Yeah, basically, possibly the connection is, to my point in remembering what Bourdieu have written, is that we had a kind of huge shift at the end of the 19th century, and that shift is really the definitive commodification of art, which is opening at the same time the issue of the avant-garde, which is the reaction towards this kind of commodification. And the two things are going together, and the mediation between these two dimensions is done by the art field, is done by the mediators, by the ones that are able to understand the avant-garde and then bring the avant-garde to the market, and doing this kind of slow motion connection. And this is the art system. And this art system went on and grown. And what we are seeing now is not different. It's exactly the extreme consequences of that development. And this is why, for me, it could be interesting to detect if within this system you have movement that are consistent with the overall objective of having a good development of the arts at world level, or if you have dynamics that are in a sense limiting this opening of the system. And this is basically the intention, I mean, the willing that I'm taking care of in doing this. And so I also agree with this is a way of representing things like urbanistic plan instead of looking at the houses. I mean, it's, it is a little bit like this.
But for example, an artist looking at this, you would say, all right, by the traditions of the movement of always trying to work against the frame of the consensus or the frame of operation or the frame of the market, someone would operate differently to work outside of those normal distribution networks or normal distribution channels. And that has always been sort of like this system of checks and balances, that at a certain point an artist introduces a new genre, and that constitutes the new, that is based on the traditional. It's not something necessarily radically new, but it's based upon working against established roots of patterns and rituals. And then we're going into, for example, we're reaching up into the 60s, and we're seeing Smithson's non-site as an institutional critique, and then institutional critique arises in the 70s. What happens now? Like, is there a position where someone can have a radical position outside of this kind of sealed bubble of clusters? I mean, is there a position of being an artist generated through the system that validates that artist through the system? Is there a position where that artists can find whatever that form or that genre is as the new?
In my perception, it's a matter of life cycle. And what is normally happening is that the artists, let's say, have a time to develop some kind of independency in the first part of their activity, and then they have to enter the system. And the way in which they enter the system is crucial. Because if they choose the wrong gallery, is bad for them. I mean, it's important. It's important which gallery they choose, and therefore there is a kind of interaction that I think have not been yet studied enough. I mean, to understand working with some of those platforms or some of those galleries, which are the implications for the work of the artist. I mean, there is a double direction influence. There is not. I mean, probably you have different cases. But what I understand, if you have a kind of underworld in which the scouts are going and cherry picking and bringing up, and this transition point is making the differences between the system. Because you have systems which are very good in doing this, and systems which are not, and this is a long-term difference. Systems which are good in picking up this, let's say, underworld opportunities are the ones that are winning, in a sense. So to me, it is also inspiring me the idea that if you want to develop a national policy, you need to think in the 20 years terms. I mean, you cannot do a short-term national policy. You have to work in the long term, because these are very stable phenomena. The dominant system are stable, always the same. So what can be the alternative? Maybe we don't need an alternative.
But wouldn't you say that this is an American Anglo-Euro-centric model,
Yeah.
and that is being contested by the phenomenon of global markets?
It could be. It could be. If it's not open enough, it's not necessary. It could. I don't know. I'm not a futurologist. I mean, but it's interesting to have a kind of discussion. I mean, it's a gaze.
Oh, yeah, also because both of you, I mean, the question could be also like how the role of the artist, but also the role of the critic, the role of the curator is able to resist or not resist, or there are different forms of resistance, and it's not necessarily something that is happening outside this graphic that is more interesting, that is happening inside this market, this graphic. So that's for sure a kind of open up not only the discussion but the research, because you are like pointing out that there is also museum, there are also foundations, there are also cultural institutions that are not here because you did not map what happened in those spaces, but could be kind of another chapter of a step forward, let's say, because you see what we see now are list of names, list of networks, nationalities, and this kind of position. But of course, around this bubble, there are a lot of not only names, but quite different other actors, players,
like museums or
everything. So the idea to the resistance of the activity of the artists and curators and all the people that are here and outside here could be included in further steps of this research that probably will, how can I say, turn this data less ambiguous than what we see right now, which is just a kind of snapshot in the Art Basel history. So, and no, the thing that I think I was thinking about is also if we can put the one of the question like, if this research can help us in understand which are the let's say the making of the artworks. Does the procedure of making art by an artist is influenced in terms of really the artworks is influenced about from this perspective? So it could be a kind of new narrative, a new framework in which we can put the analysis of the artwork. So I will kind of exaggerate the question, but it's like the vita, the life of artists of Vasari. Can we add in a kind of book written in the 21st century this graphic inside a biography of artists that is not just a list of things that he has done, but a kind of more complex narration of the process he's doing?
That is what Sophie Richard has done in the book Unconcealed, in a sense, explaining how the conceptual art has been fostered by an alliance between galleries and museums and people, basically. And yes, to me it could be an interesting proposition. And And yes, the other part of the research that we've done is on the museums, but we don't have the data here. We monitored 15 European museums in the last 10 years, all the exhibitions that they have done, and the curator and the list of artists, and probably we'll try to match the two things, because the impression is that as the budget have been cut all around Europe very strongly, museums have to rely on the gallery system in order to produce their exhibitions, so that there will be an increasing connection between this action and the art history as a whole. I mean,
so in fact, that was your main hypothesis in doing an analysis like this, that eventually moving toward that, the reason why you're looking at this structure versus analyzing another structure is that you're looking at supporting a hypothesis that this is the primary validating structure in the contemporary art situation.
This is basically what I think, yes.
So a primary validating structure
it's one
beyond
of the most
museums.
important, one of the most important. Yeah, I think so. And, and this is why I'm curious about the way in which it's functioning. I don't know if it will be possible. But
so we've moved from a 19th century model of the avant-garde moving away and contesting private patronage to establishing of museums as the validating course, to corporate sponsorship in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, back to private patronage.
Back to private, and they are the central actor. Yeah, I would say.
So I think it's time to open the discussion to the public.
If it's anybody
if
wants.
there are anybody, any question, any tweets or whatever from the public, I didn't see any hand.
Intimidated by you?
Two?
Yeah.
A mic is coming.
The microphone is coming.
Hello, I'm Mariama from America. Thank you for having the discussion today. You mentioned that Art Basel will be held in China the next time around.
I'm not saying that. I've heard rumors about that, but I don't know. I mean, it is possible. I mean, it is.
I had a question about the role of economic superpowers and the proliferation of art, and how it changes how we view conceptual art and what art is in this next century. So do you have an opinion, do you feel that, how do you think the rise of China has influenced art within the last 5 years?
Wow, this is yours. Maybe we can collect a couple of questions and then we try to answer, or you want, no, go on.
One after the other.
Basically, if I may answer something, I'm not an art historian, I'm an economic historian, which is slightly a different story. My impression is that you don't have, you cannot think about this bubble as a tight system. They are very complex and very articulated. So you cannot say you have a US policy about the imaginary production, which have been a theme during say, reflecting about the emerging of the art of the 50s and the 60s. I don't think you will find this. You find connection. You find loose connection between individuals and groups that are developing lines which are cultural and economic at the same time, because they need to be sustained. You need to find the sustainability of the process, because the art system needs to be sustained, and the states are not involved in that. You cannot expect in the future that the state will be the backers of the new art system. I mean, we have to count on our forces, and therefore it is reasonable that you have this double dimension, and that and of course, if you have to solve asymmetrical information, because the collector is asking to the galleries to solve for him a lot of research and information gathering. And therefore, of course, the galleries will act inside a system, inside a local environment, inside a place. And this is why, if he is American and works in New York, he will be more able to scan the environment which is surrounding him at large. And this is a consequence of this structural dynamic. So I wouldn't suggest to look at underneath strategies. It's too much.
But also, I mean, I'm not an economist, but at the same time, traditionally, or in the past, since the 1950s, and before then, the market has adjusted so much that it does need high-risk areas of investment, and so that there is a higher rate of return. So for the global market to operate, it needs to have higher rates of return in areas that are higher risk. And in order to seek out economic investment in particular regions of the world, it is known that the primary way to mine the fields is cultural investment. And the cultural investment is the way to see whether it's possible to then go in and do economic investments. So perhaps it's worth looking into those areas for economic studies and seeing the parallel situations there. I mean, you saw that at the end of the 80s, there was a surge in the Russian markets and what was in the post-Soviet. After that was, of course, the markets in India and the markets in Asia, and it's always in parallel to a kind of boom in the art market and then a kind of falling off of that eventually, and then a kind of stabilization of it. Now, that's just a postulate. It's not proven, but...
I have one question to the gentleman here, the first one.
Bob Adler, also from the States. I wonder whether you could talk about two constituents you haven't discussed fully yet. And one, not just government in terms of funding museums so that they could purchase art and therefore drive it, but government policy related to taxes and other issues as it affects the market value of art. And then at the other end, the role of the insurance industry in terms of defining what art is worth for insurance purposes, since we are talking about market value.
You took interns or returns? You're talking about returns? Returns.
Insurance industry defining value.
Yes.
I'm not sure.
The insurance. I mean, this. I think the situation.
Sure I understood the question.
This is. Of course, the American model is very much based on the fact that you have private patronage and you don't have great government patronage, but that there is a level of the insurance companies, and the insurance companies appraising the art, and that actually becoming exorbitantly expensive for museums to actually loan works of art from collections and from other museums, because the kind of premiums that you need to pay in order to cover make it almost impossible or nearly impossible. I mean, I cannot speak on the part of the insurance companies. I don't know exactly how that's done, so I can't speak about that on any kind of important level.
As far as I know, for the Italian system, you don't have such an impact of those actors. I generally feel that of course, this is a pretty internationalized movement. I mean, what we are looking at is a kind of offshore dynamic, in which the laws of the single government are influential until a certain point. I mean, so I don't think that an evolution of the law in Italy, of course it will help Italian galleries, because if we have a tax reduction, let's say, it will be more easy to develop the market. If we have a VAT of 20% on the art pieces in Italy, of course this is affecting the market in Italy. Okay? And this is weakening the position of Italian galleries in the overall system, because they have to work outside. But it's a very local. I mean, this is the overall movement is influenced but not determined by those. I mean, because it will shift. It will shift in the place in which the law is more comfortable. This is my opinion.
But I think your question is valid in that that system of patronage and the systems of operation in the United States, for example, are being looked at and to be adopted, for example, in Scandinavia. It's traditionally a social democratic region. There's no tradition of private patronage. There are no tax incentives, for example, tax loopholes for collecting art, and therefore, but yet there's this gradual neoliberalist move toward that kind of system of patronage and sponsorship and support of the arts. So there's a fracture. So there's like an attempted emulation of that system, and yet the codes, the tax structures are not being employed in order to make that kind of system effective in these regions. So there's not enough discussion being had in how this can all be a real operative system. It's not fully transparent.
I think there was a question there.
Thank you very much for this very enlightening presentation. My question to you...
To me?
Yes, specifically, is that because this being a statistical study, have you done similar data sampling for Art Miami, for instance?
Not yet.
Okay, because my next question is what kind of standard deviation that you have found between that? And also, because of the, well, I understood that, you know, art market wasn't very much affected by the financial crisis in 2008 to 2009. But this is a collective statistics. How different is this during that 2 years that you have done, say, for the year independently? And also, the next question, still statistics. You're economists. This is chicken to you. So, okay, taking other art fairs in the region, of course, bearing in mind Art Basel is the biggest in the world, like Art Freeze, which is coming out because of your the other slides that for people who are born after 1970s. So Art Freeze perhaps it would be considered as a younger market, maybe even for collectors. Correct me if I'm wrong. You know, I don't come from this part of the world and not very savvy. Yeah. So so will these statistics, this map, if I would call it this way, superimpose if you would have done data analysis on the freeze market or Art Cologne for that matter, which has a several year history? Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to be a little bit deceiving, but you know, it took 1.5 years to develop the research on Art Basel and to collect all the data and to begin the. So we start from this because we're not certain about the fact that we are doing some meaningful things. So we begin with Art Basel. We have the data for Art Basel, and we began to interpret it. Taking it as a whole, okay? So the first point is, I think that these structures are stable. So this structure has not been altered by the crisis, okay? And if you may find some signs of the effect of the crisis, you could find them in the concentration on the more traditional platform. So the fact that the stronger are getting stronger, I feel this as an effect of the possible effect of the crisis. And therefore, the evolution is, in a sense, strengthening the position of the central actor. And we don't have all the data. We looked at freeze. We didn't done a direct study on that. But I'm pretty sure that you will find the same clustering. Because this is the top. Art Basel is not only the bigger, it's the top. These are the most important player at world level, so it won't change a lot. You may find different things around, but they are not relevant in the same dimension. So I think that this is basically the overall picture. Yeah. I don't know if I answered, but we are at the beginning. If you are interested, you can mail us and we stay in touch. These are the mail, if you want to write.
I have a question. I was at the talk yesterday on art and parallel economies, but there was no economist on that panel. So my question is to you as an economist, do you think that this model that you have discovered through your research, or that exists, do you think that permits or provokes the development of other parallel economies outside of that, or do you see it more as a development of this single economy?
In the crystal sphere, my impression is that this is dominant, and you know, the strong power are strong. And it means that it's difficult to shift. This is a very established system, and it is functioning. This is the most important thing. It is something which is going on, and the art is this. So, you know, the parallel or the alternative, if you think about that, of course, first you need to think in the very long term. Second, probably you think about fringes. And maybe you can have fringes that are coexisting with this system, and even functionally, because it's nice to have a little, small, nice parallel economy. That means that you are democratic in a sense, and it's good. I mean, it's and this is also democratic in a sense, but it is, of course, something that is at high level. So you need to work a lot in order to be in the system. Okay, so there is a level that you have to go on, and the danger of the quick solution, the alternative quick solution, is to do things that are not really culturally rooted. I mean, this is one of the possible dangers. I don't know if I answered you. I mean, sorry.
But it's true, I didn't want to lose, but it is true that the idea of parallel economy and could be done in parallel on this research, because another chapter is the editorial system, so in a different format. So how the editorial power in terms of publishing, catalog, magazine, influx, or whatever, could be included also, exactly as museum or foundation in this system. So I think it would be interesting, like, putting your question into also which are the economies. It's not just really artists, galleries, but it's also what is around, and the editorial system is very powerful in these terms.
What was discussed yesterday?
I mean,
oh, sorry, we need to.
We didn't.
Yeah, e-flux and ideas about well, non-monetary economies. But I was my question was about economies in the traditional sense of did you think that this economy would provoke a bit in the way that you were saying, would it provoke art as a reaction? Would it then provoke or support a different type of economy as a reaction? To outside
I guess we
the
haven't
model.
seen that yet.
No,
But do you think it
we can
it
hope.
will?
We can hope. Yeah, of course.
I mean,
of course.
I'm a curator, and I hope that it provokes some kind of, I mean, the art is based on some kind of dynamic and a historical dynamic that is cyclical and also ever-changing, and I hope that it leads to another status and another appearance of something other.
Yeah, the main thing is that the system as it is historical. So it started and defined itself between the 19th and the 20th century. So it is something that is lasting for 100 years. So it will probably transform itself in something else. And all the experimentation will give contribution to this modification. But we cannot illude ourselves about the time and the way, because you have structure inside.
I mean, it has already changed in the last 10 years. I mean, something called a curator was something else 20 years ago than it was today. And there was this association of independent curators 10 years ago that didn't necessarily have institutional affiliation. The curatorial schools only started in the late 1980s, and it evolved out of something called art management schools, which were part of the business schools. So curating, and there was a school at the NYU called the Institute of Fine Arts, which was in connoisseurship. It was a 4-year program. So I mean, the idea of an MA in curating is basically a phenomenon of the last 15 to 20 years. And so you have this new workforce that didn't exist before, and how they will be employed in the next years in positions that are not traditionally available any longer in curating, but will actually go back to something of a management structure. So you're actually going back to something that might be lodged more within a financial structure or master's program back into business schools rather than in cultural studies, for example.
This is why we opened that master.
So I think we have to. No, there is a question, but okay.
The last
no,
one?
no.
The last
They
one?
told me to cut.
Personally.
Yeah. With the last.
Would you imagine also, well, you spoke most of regional, and the world, it's citizens of the world, artists that have traveled, have multinationalities. Would you see a possibility of something new emerging in this sense, where he doesn't only represent like one culture, but also like I have participated of group studies of new museums that connect, like with internet we have much more information and access to other cultures and dialogues. Would you imagine something in this sense developing? And what would you recommend for artists that have this ground?
I mean, we're still in the field of what we hope or what we imagine that could happen, but of course we should assist to the growth of different position, and maybe also within this platform the articulation inside may produce experiments and situations of this kind, because the fact that you are belonging from, let's say, the Italian galleries platform does not imply that you are stuck into a single behavior. You can evaluate your behavior toward the kind of experimentation that you're talking about, and they are not necessarily contradicting the functioning of the system as a whole. It is a pretty flexible, I mean, I should say, environment. So, yeah, I think there are spaces.
Also, I mean, I think Stefano and the study here is about analyzing a system of validation.
Yeah.
And it is a very powerful system of validation, but there are certainly other systems and networks and distributions and for artists. And it's just a decision an artist can perhaps make or gets involved in, which is a system of validation, but also a system of income, and entering into the system almost as a profession. But that's a choice, or that's a pattern that you fall into. But there are certainly, and I see that people certainly and artists operate outside of that system.
So,
okay.
Thank you to all of us, and thank you to Marta Stefano. And I think we have no more time. So that's it. Hope to see you next year.
Okay.
Bye-bye.